Hi everyone, welcome to an episode of Inside. In today's episode, we are going to talk about the COP26, so the COP26 that is currently taking place in Glasgow in United Kingdom. And the two-week global climate summit is being attended by all 197 member countries. Now we're going to talk about and we're going to discuss the COP26, but in the India context, as many of you might know that for the very first time, India has set targeted goals for itself to combat climate change. Now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he addressed COP26 and he laid down his Panchamrit, or 5 commitments that he's made for India to reduce carbon emissions, to essentially get off the list of the world's largest polluters. PM set a target of 2070 for India to become carbon neutral, which is quite significant. That's a big statement that he made. He also said that by 2030, India's energy requirements, or 50% of India's energy requirement, will be met by renewable sources of energy. He also said that by 2030, India will reduce carbon dependency of its economy to less than 45%. He also said that India will reduce the total carbon emissions by 1 billion tons from now, which is 2021, to 2030. And finally, he said that by 2030, India will reach its non-fossil energy capacity to 500 gigawatts. Now, all of these are very, very ambitious goals and definitely significant, and of course, very much the need of the hour. But the question that arises at this point is how attainable are these goals realistically, and more importantly, what are the immediate steps that need to be taken in order for these goals to for us to meet these goals that we've set for ourselves. And to answer these precise questions and more, we have with us Mr. Vimlendu Jha. He's a well-known environmentalist in India and the founder of Swachha, an environmental NGO, which does some very, very important work on sustainability and environmental protection. So I'm really, really grateful to you, Vimlendu, for you to be able to join us on this program.
Thank you, Priyata. Thank you for speaking to me, and I look forward to this discussion.
Right. Vimlendu, you heard Mr. Modi's speech. It was very bold and ambitious targets that he set for India, like I said. How do you look at these targets? And like I said in the introduction, how attainable do you think these goals are in your understanding, given India's current massive dependency on coal and fossil fuels? So how attainable do you think these goals are?
So Priyata rightly put, it was very, very bold on the part, how the Prime Minister actually put down India's promise or pledge in that sense when it comes to issues of climate change or large carbon consumption sense. Nobody was expecting this from a country like India. And the reason why world shouldn't expect this or did not expect this from India is that it is not India's doing. India is at the receiving end of climate crisis. The current climate crisis is the doing of the first world. As I keep talking about the fact that 7 countries, or the 7 richest countries of the world, have the contribution of almost 70% of overall greenhouse gases, and India is almost like 3% collectively, and annual around 5 to 6% is what its annual flow of carbon is in that sense. So it's not India's doing, but for India to make that pledge, take that pledge that yes, we are going to reduce our carbon, and also to get net zero by 2070 and get 50% to renewable energy by 2030. It's very, very bold. The challenge, as you put, is not in taking a pledge, because we have taken a pledge day before yesterday, or in 2021 there's a set of pledges that many countries have taken. There was a pledge taken with regard to climate change at Paris in 2015. Before that, we've had many such pledges that were taken in Copenhagen, in Doha, in Rio, in Kyoto. And if you historically look at these COPs, or these conference of parties with regard to climate change, we've lived between one pledge year to another pledge year, and we have actually not stood by the pledge that they have, that's been taken, or that's been promised in a sense. So interestingly, it would be important for us to know that how many countries, including India, actually stand true, honest, genuine, and do justice to the promise that they're actually making to the world community. As if you look at what IPCC report, just last month or a couple of months ago was actually talking about that it's already too late. It's already code red. It's already, we've surpassed that target that we had actually made for ourselves in 2015 at Paris. And therefore it's, we need to really make our targets more ambitious than what we talked about in Paris in the sense. India's, my personal opinion is that good that India's made these promises, but we have to make, smaller targets rather than 2070 as a target. 50 years from now is one target, but unless and until we actually have a 5-year and a 10-year plan with regard to everything, with regard to energy, also not, when we talk about energy is not just one sector. There are multiple sectors, from industry to small and medium-sized enterprises. There's road, there's shipping, there's mining. Unless and until all these sectors together don't make short-term attainable plans, we will not be able to reach at net zero in 2070. Please also understand that net zero almost is contrary, or has there's a great contradiction when we talk about net zero and talk about climate justice at the same time, because a lot of India that we're talking about, almost 27 million of our population doesn't have access to electricity. And not just that, as in there's a huge population grappling with poverty, and energy plays a key important role. And energy is important to bring India or Indians out of poverty in that sense, not just from a lifestyle point of view, but basic sustenance, basic livelihood, basic nutrition, basic healthcare. A lot of that depends on energy in a sense. So it will be very interesting for us to see that how does that promise made in Glasgow break down into policies here and action plans and multiple 5-year plans for this transition to a low carbon economy in the sense.
Vimlendu, I'm very interested to know, are there any frameworks or procedures in place to keep countries in check in terms of the kind of pledges that they've made? Is there any framework in place to keep these countries to kind of keep a track on where they are in their journey of achieving those so-called pledges that they've made?
A lot of this pledge, promise, and whether you stand by your pledge or promise is self-declaration. There's no way scientifically to understand. Of course, there's some bit of research that has happened where if you look at IPCC report or look at carbon footprint per capita report, a lot of that is based on the economic survey. So India's economic survey will give us a data in terms of how much carbon is each citizen consuming, or what's the national average. And that's where we arrive at 1.9. But in terms of our own promise, other than that, your own admission and your own submission, in your budget and otherwise in your own personal documents, there's no way to monitor how much of it is right and how much of it is not right. There's no policing, there's no accountability as such. It's about you believe in a policy like this, you believe in a low carbon future, you believe in a low carbon growth, and now not just low carbon growth, zero carbon growth post 2070, and that's why you sign up to this. So it's a collective responsibility in an interdependent world where we actually seek accountability of us and also seek accountability of the other, who is the emitter, small or big. As in we say that China, for example, everyone is asking a lot from China because 33% of emissions are coming from one nation. Yeah. And there's very little transparency in that sense from a data point of view to know how is China growing. China is very secretive about its growth, its energy policy, and so on and so forth. So there will always be that opaqueness when it comes to a country trying to judge the other country. Therefore, it's based on your own understanding.
Vimlendu, as an environmentalist, what, according to you, are the immediate steps that India needs to take in order to meet these goals that we've set for ourselves?
I look at, as I said, for me, net zero is something that I don't want to get into so much. I'm more excited about this 2030 target or 2040 target. And two broad sectors that excite me, or that perhaps is attainable, or that is where the actual impact will be. One is mobility slash transport. And I think that's extremely important to really bring in innovation there. And that's where I look at 3 stages of that transition in mobility space vis-a-vis carbon. One is short term, where I'm largely looking at investing in rail as a transport, like public transport in general, but rail-based public transport in particular. In short term, that is something that we need to attain. In medium term, if you can actually look at somewhat sustainable fuel, which is CNG and other sources, even electricity for that matter, but electricity not that is powered by coal, but by other sources. As in, at the end of the day, you have an electric car, but if that electric car is actually powered by a coal thermal power plant, then
exactly,
it's a oxymoronish point to make. So second stage and midterm goal for India vis-a-vis mobility and carbon would be to really look at more sustainable fuel. And third, which is perhaps by 2040, 2050, and this will not be possible unless until there's that $1 trillion or that $100 billion that is actually given by the first world to get into hydrogen in many, many ways, or hydrogen-powered mobility that we need to do. That's one sector. The other sector, of course, is to really go coal less. And it's very difficult, as you know, for a country like India, that 70% of our electricity or energy needs are catered by coal. The fact that we are still mining and also importing a lot. Coal India, for example, is the biggest miner of coal in the world, and by 2024, it's looking at almost mining 1 billion tons more of coal in the sense. So our coal targets are increasing, are peaking. And still we are talking about, we'll get rid of coal. So there's some bit of a contradiction there, but we can park it and talk about it later. But in some way, if we can bring in that transition in our energy sector, both energy for domestic and domestic use and power use, and energy also for industry, I think it will be really, really big. There will be some bit of innovation, both in mobility sector, as I said, mobility / transport sector and energy sector. If we are able to do these 2 broad, big sectors, we'll be able to achieve this in 2030 or 2040 in a sense. We will need some bold steps, not in Glasgow, but a few bold steps in India. And that is very, very important. As in, I think somewhere in the last couple of years, we've actually seen not such great things happening on the front of environment. We've seen dilution of environmental norms. We've seen dilution of environmental impact assessment, draft 2020. We've seen how forest laws have been diluted. We cannot really save our environment or attain that climate change target if we continue to really plunder our natural resources and our indigenous people who are sitting over these natural resources.
Right. Vimlendu, you were talking about the effects of climate change that we are seeing all around the world. And in fact, we don't even need to look that far, because in the last 2 years alone, India has seen such devastation, occurring because of things like unseasonal, heavy monsoons in so many parts of the country that have caused floods, flash floods. We've seen cloudbursts, we've seen cyclones, typhoons. So what, according to you, is the biggest environmental threat that India can face in the near future if we continue with things being the way that they are?
See, the most vulnerable when we talk in Indian context, the most vulnerable population actually is people living on the coastline, and we have a huge coastline, from Bay of Bengal here to Gujarat on this side. So the entire southern India, I don't know, I think it's 1,400 kilometers or 1,600 kilometers of coastline that we have. And if you look at the IPCC report, the recent one clearly talks about that being the most vulnerable, both in terms of cyclone as well as rise in sea levels. That report talks about how there will be several cities or several small little settlements around our coastline that will actually go underwater. So that is one thing. The other is with haphazard development that is actually happening in several of these ecologically sensitive zones. So, when you construct in Uttarakhand, when you build a hydroelectric power plant in the, higher reaches of Himalayas, Hydroelectric actually sounds as if, it's no coal, it's non-coal, it's green. But, the excavation work, the mountain cutting work, and the tree cutting and the forest felling that you actually do in the upper reaches of Himalayas, that is what kills people. The landslides, so cloudburst can happen because of climate change, but landslide because of cloudburst and that killing hundreds and hundreds of people and trapping people downstream is because of our mankind. So it's a human-induced disaster rather than climate-induced disaster in the sense. So I look at many of that, as in Kerala also. Imagine a lot of disaster. Of course, there was more than normal rain, but more than normal rain caused more than normal damage because there was more than normal development in more than normal areas which were supposed to be ecologically sensitive zones or preserved zones. These were waterways that were actually occupied, encroached upon through construction. There were several reports in the last 10, 15 years, warning us not to construct in these ecologically sensitive zones. And then the nature's fury took back everything and created a huge devastation. 3.5% of our GDP was lost to climate-based disaster just last year, just last 1 year. 37 billion US dollars is what India lost to climate-related weather events. India is getting affected on different fronts through accidents. So when you talk about events that we hear about of a Kedarnath or of a Kerala or of a Darjeeling, and then there's recurring, which is unknown, which is slow. Like Delhi's air pollution, for example, is also because of the kind of energy that we use. Industries and the vehicles that we talk about, or the construction that is actually happening, and that is 365 days. So some of the things are not necessarily when there's a cyclone or there's a flood or there's a cloudburst. Some effects of climate change we are facing on everyday basis. Imagine, as per Niti Aayog's report, almost 12 cities have completely run out of groundwater. So we have run out of groundwater. 80% of our surface water is contaminated. Most cities of India actually have a bad AQI. All of that is some way or the other linked to how we combat climate change, or what's our input and output when it comes to climate.
Right. You were talking about Delhi's air quality. So I do want to get your opinion on a specific issue, which is, of course, crop burning that occurs during a season, which is the end of the year, every single year. And that causes Delhi and Punjab and Haryana's air quality to drop significantly. And this happens year after year after year. And yet we have not come up with a proper solution to this.
So we wake up only in the month of October when it comes to air pollution, and then go back to sleep by December. Right? Air pollution is perennial. Air pollution is something which is 365 days. And it's also, there are several parties to this. Indeed, stubble burning is something that stubble burning and firecrackers both grab that headline every time. As in, since morning, I've done around 20 shows talking about firecrackers and how it should be banned. But with respect to stubble burning, we will not be able to find a solution to stubble burning by just looking at stubble alone. We will have to look at our agricultural policy. What are we growing where and at what cost is extremely important. Since 1960s, when, with Green Revolution, Punjab, Haryana, and parts of Uttar Pradesh got into growing a lot of food grain, grain for the world in that sense, or grain for the country. We wanted to be a food secure nation. But in the process of being food secure, what we actually ended up doing is took all the water away. And to really solve that water crisis that Punjab and Haryana were actually facing, the entire sowing month was actually moved. And that's where your harvesting month moved closer to the time when weather conditions are not conducive to really burning stubble. So it's not as if farmers started burning stubble now. Farmers have been burning stubble for a long time. Right. But stubble burning plus the weather conditions plus the existing pollution of Delhi NCR altogether really makes it a toxic concoction. Right. So stubble burning needs to stop, but we can't vilify farmers. All these solutions of a machine or of a tractor and the feeder and all those subsidized machines, or the other spray that Delhi government is talking about, these are again band-aid stopgap solutions. This is not what will solve a long-term crisis of stubble burning or agrarian crisis. We will have to get into crop rotation, crop diversification. We cannot be growing rice and wheat in a dry state, almost a dry state called Haryana and Punjab. if it's a problem that's been happening every year, and if green revolution caused this problem for last 30, 40 years, and it's linked to cancer, it's linked to use of pesticides and fertilizers, it's linked to almost exporting water and water crisis, we will have to look at shaking the fundamentals of farming or agriculture in that sense in northern India. So most of the scientists or most of the experts who talk about stubble burning is we don't even need the stubble. We have to get rid of stubble itself, not by not burning or burning, but perhaps starting to grow something else. And that is where crop diversification is very important. That's where you incentivize farmers who don't even eat rice in Punjab, not to grow rice, but to grow something else. And therefore that minimum support price, MSP, should be given or incentivized to be given on those crops that perhaps India consumes and doesn't have this challenge of stubble burning. But stubble burning, as per government's own admission, contribution of stubble burning on any given day for these 25, almost 25 to 30 days is when stubble burning happens in North India, is only 2% to some days 40%. Majority of it, so 98% to 60% of Delhi's air is polluted by those vehicles, the lack of public transport that we have, that dust that we have on our roadside or construction demolition, that open burning of garbage that happens locally as well as centrally by our municipalities, that cutting down of trees that's actually become a normal urbanization policy of our country. Yeah. Those are the big elephant in the room, and that needs to be addressed first.
Right. Vimlendu, you were talking about the fact that you have been on debates all day today, talking about about whether we should or should not ban firecrackers. And I just want to get your opinion on this. Like, why is this a subject that we as a society continue to debate about year after year after year? I mean, and this always happens, of course, during Diwali time. The debate, unfortunately, always comes down to the need to be environmentally conscious, but at the same time, not, hurt religious sentiments. Why do you think it always comes down to this? Why have we not been able to ban firecrackers 100% all over the country for all festivals, not just Diwali, not just a Hindu or not just a Muslim festival, for all festivals? I mean, why is it something that we're still continuing to debate year after year after year?
Yeah, it hurts. It's very, very painful for me to really, say the same thing again and again, all through the day today and yesteryear and year before. This has nothing to do with faith. In sane society, you don't even need to discuss this. Like, imagine we've changed our lifestyle because of COVID, right? There's a COVID protocol in our lives because we can't afford to act as normal. What we did last year, we can't do that now because the world has changed. Similarly, with vis-a-vis air pollution, there needs to be air pollution protocol. And the courts of our country and the scientists of our country, so the law of the land and the experts and doctors of our land tell us don't burst firecrackers because it's actually bad for your lung, because the air quality index, of course, crosses the 999 mark, and PM 2.5 levels are almost 20 times worse than the permissible limits. In a sane society, we shouldn't even discuss this. Firecrackers are not part of our faith, as I've been getting trolled all morning for calling out this religious leader called Sadhguru, who is talking about how kids should be allowed to burst firecrackers because he used to do that when he was a kid. My answer to him was that, oh, well, you're not a kid anymore. As I could afford to do many things as a kid, but I will not do that as an adult because there is a certain amount of responsibility, accountability, and context. I could take a dip in Yamuna 30 years ago, but now Yamuna is black. I will not take a dip because it's not good for my health. As simple as that. Things are not the same. Air quality index is not the same what it was 40 years ago in the sense. And when we know that something pollutes, when we have the data, tell me one thing, the joy of bursting a firecracker and that pain of having a child suffering from asthma, what is more paramount? What is more important? If the elderly suffer, our animals suffer, and it has nothing to do with faith. It's Deepavali, it's a festival of lights, it's a festival of love. It's not a festival of pain and noise and grief and death. If your hospitals run out of beds on the day of Diwali, what kind of a joy are we actually bringing to this civilization? And not when the air quality is so bad. So I would, I have more conversations and shouting and screaming to do this evening across all television channels. I don't even know why should we even discuss this.
And finally, Vimlendu, what do you think that we as individuals, as citizens, now that India has set these massive goals for ourselves, to combat climate change, what do you think we as citizens, as individuals should do to be able to contribute uh, for us to be able to reach these big goals that we set?
Absolutely. So all these numbers that we talk about, carbon consumption, what is all of that? Of course, some of it is industrial and the state contributing to it, or the country or the government contributing to these big projects. But a lot of it is also cumulative of your behavior and my behavior when nobody's watching us, which is called our lifestyle. Be it a slow fashion, fast fashion lifestyle, our consumption lifestyle, our Amazon lifestyle, all of that, or our fashion lifestyle, all of it. I think it's very, very important to break this entire climate change conversation or climate crisis into our own individual lives and look at how can we bring that thing down in ways or the other, be it on, and I'd actually, I talk about different sectors. I talk about mobility, for example, that how do we actually bring in our own mobility, make it more sustainable in terms of use of public transport, in terms of electric vehicles, if possible, in terms of cycling, walking, so on and so forth. Similarly, when it comes to leisure, when it comes to work, when it comes to food, on all those sectors, you need to really do it for your own sake, for the sake, not just for a long-term goal of 2070. See, I will not be around maybe in 2070 to see what contribution I made and the impact that it has. But for my intergenerational responsibility and for my immediate responsibility towards my own head, I need to do those small little lifestyle changes. Consume less, waste less, look at your footprint, and as what Gandhiji said, that think of the last person. Every time you think of doing anything, how will your action impact that last person in the line, and then choose to do that. That's what my suggestion to every citizen would be.
Absolutely, Vimlendu. Let's leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode on my channel. I think these conversations, about climate change, about global warming, and about what we as individuals and as a collective can do, it should not be a conversation we just have once a year during the COP or during Diwali or, during stubble burning, once a year annually. I think we should be having these conversations on a daily 365 days a year. And I think all of our policies and our laws and our economic decisions from now on should be formulated with the environment in mind. And I think now is the time to do something, because after this, I think it's just going to get too late for all of us to make amends. Thank you, Vimlendu, for sharing your thoughts and your insights.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. If you like this video, make sure that you virtually like this video as well. Share the video with your friends and your followers. And most importantly, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more responsible and for more credible news videos. Thank you so much for watching.